You can go ahead, man. Karibu sana.
Okay, good stuff. All right. So I know this is how do I put it? I just want to come and present about the topic. I thought we can have conversations and um, maybe separate or slightly different from how maybe I've done the previous two sessions. Is um, I'm happy if you want to interrupt, interject, just jump in and probably have a comment or something that you want to um, add on based on an experience or maybe a perspective that you have that I might have missed from the conversation. I'm happy to get that kind of engagement as we go on. I'm also saying this because it's an interesting topic when you talk of platforms and ecosystems. Keep finding myself trying to understand, like, the way you normally, as you start your career in product management, mostly you begin from a point of, you're just doing features, and even if to a much more simpler place, you're looking at, basically user stories, based on the gaps, on the needs you identify from the users, and how now that translates slowly into the features, and features translate into products. And a lot of us are actually at product level because when you think about it, um, products, as you keep working on products, then the next level is how do you become a platform manager, which is like a product manager who is experienced in handling platforms, or developing platforms. And we'll see what platforms are all about. And then now the advanced level is how can you be an orchestrator? So an orchestrator of an ecosystem simply means you as a product manager, you're looking at it from a point of how do I build an ecosystem? How do I drive an ecosystem, and what does it come with? So if let me see from my slides. Yeah. So yeah, I think this is just a very brief recap. We looked at the other sessions. We looked at it from a point of stakeholder management. We also looked at backlog management, and I mean it's just more of a recap. So I wouldn't dwell on it. Some of us might have been there, some not, but it's still okay. But then I have always loved this screen here because yeah, it just gives you a bit of the chaos that you go through as a product manager in terms of stakeholder management. I think increasingly I'm strongly believing that stakeholder management is the biggest headache that we face as product managers, because you're trying to manage the interests of different stakeholders, different competing interests, of different people, whether internal organization or external, above you, below you, even your team, your devs are stakeholders, in terms of what you do. So how do you manage it? How do you connect all that in terms of delivery? And we spend a lot of time on it, and I think it's been an area of passion for me personally, because you can never really know and come and say that you're really good and you've actually mastered stakeholder management, because you're simply going to be saying you know how to deal with human beings, and fully, no human being can stress you, no one can get on you or step on you and feel like you're frustrated. So it's an ongoing lesson, it's an ongoing process that you get to figure out how to deal with. Yeah, but again, we're not talking about stakeholder management. This is just, I'm sure you can relate with a lot of your day-to-day life, the sprint reviews, the stand-ups, how you're dealing with the backlog, the development team, customers or the users that you're serving. I think that remains to be one of the biggest, and how that plays out. So yeah, on to today's topic. So my focus was just slightly on building ecosystems, and that's what I wanted to dwell on. And I don't like words, and I don't like, a lot of worded kind of slides, but I just thought I'll have this for intro, for a bit of context on what it comes with. So um, people have defined ecosystems differently. They have different definitions and all that. I like this quote from the Nokia CEO. He simply said that our competitors aren't taking our market share with devices, but they're taking our market share with an entire ecosystem. I mean, he was just talking about the whole concept of who is actually your competitor, what are they doing, and this is some time back, and you think your competitor is coming exactly a similar replica of the product that you have, but then you see evolution over the last years, that last probably decade or so, the rise of ecosystems, and sometimes people call it the rise of shared value ecosystem, and how that is changing how competition or how competitors are, operating the market. And we're going to look a bit of how that plays in. Interestingly, I mean, they just talk about when you talk of an ecosystem, is you're offering multiple complementary products, or services. There's a bit of an experience perspective. So experience here is an example I like using is when you go to this, a supermarket is an ecosystem. If you just want to think very simply about it, uh, I I find myself a lot at the junction, sometimes at Sarit, but Sarit, I keep looking for my car every other time I go there, especially in you park at the basement. You'll be there acting all confident, but somehow you just can't find the car. And then you always wonder, was it this floor? Was it? I never get the car. And then you have this mini heartbeats of, oh my God, did someone just steal my entire car? Then you find it there after like going up and down. And yeah, then you have to figure out the chaos of living the mall, and you know how it goes. I don't know who designed it, but there has to be something that can be done. The product manager of Sarit needs to do something about it. Yeah, that's why I think I'm very old school. I just prefer to park outside. That old traditional, like old, the usual, like before they did the extension, because you know where you left it, even if it's in the sun. That's not the point. The point is, a mall is an example of an ecosystem, which is very real. And why we prefer this kind of malls is one of the reasons is an all-in-one experience that I can go to a mall, whether it's Junction or Sarit or the Hub, and then I can do my shopping if it's in a supermarket, and I want to probably buy something at one of the stores, whether it's like, you want to check something at LC Waikiki or Woolworths, you want to check out some bags. I mean, there are quite a number of things. If you have kids, you want to check out some toys and all that. It gives you an experience of what an ecosystem is. And the point is, you're being given an experience. Can you imagine of all these places and all these things are in different places? And that's why in the past, I mean, depending again how old you are, I mean, you've seen how evolution of stores are happening and the supermarkets. But in the past, you'll find like we had a lot of standalone service providers. So that's why for them, they're keen on how can you bring people and these services in one place and give you an all-in-one experience that I'll come back after 3 hours, I've done a bunch of things. And that's where an ecosystem is just deriving from. So when you think of product ecosystems in our space, it's interesting because it just looks at the same topic, but then from a very technical perspective in terms of a product. What are the channels of access and how that comes in play? So yeah, I hope it gives a bit of context, and that's why you see I have at the bottom the need or the problem evolving into user stories, which evolves now into the features you're talking about, into products. Products have evolved now into becoming platforms, and platforms are evolving into becoming ecosystems. Again, I don't know if anyone knows the difference between a platform and ecosystem. If you do, please feel free to put in the chat. But yeah, again, you're just going to be looking at what is exact difference. These words are interchangeably used lately, and sometimes you really can't tell. People mix them up and all that. But you find multiple platforms will be like subsets of an ecosystem. So an ecosystem will have multiple platforms within it, and that kind of a thing. Platforms tend to be very internally facing. Maybe you have started with a product in the organization, but then you slowly transition into evolving the product to have different facets or different faces of that particular product within the same architecture or the solution that you have within the organization. But then you're trying to see how do we offer different services to the same customers within the same brand that we are. But then from an ecosystem perspective, at some point you do realize you can't give everything, you can't offer everything, it becomes a bit overwhelming. And that's why you find now organizations start thinking of ecosystems. Ecosystems simply say that I can't do everything on my own. I have figured out these are the needs of our customers, but then we are limited by either technology, by budget, we're limited by branding, we're limited by marketing, we are limited by regulation, geographical location and all that. Those are limitations that then make you wonder and ask, what can we use and who can we leverage on in terms of the strength to come and build on to what we have, and therefore ecosystems, and you find that is the rise of ecosystems. So interestingly, again, when you just think a bit from a very global perspective, you'll start to realize some of the ecosystems that actually exist. An example is something like the Apple ecosystem. I mean, that is one of the biggest examples. I mean the big five tech companies, whether it's Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, or Meta now, if you want to call it. In fact, even Google, you'll talk of Alphabet, not Google, because it gives you the whole concept of how you started as Google, but then you realize our vision wasn't big enough to take us to the next decade of innovations. Then we'll probably have to form another company that will now be the mother company of Google, and then you have other Googles, something like that. So how do you figure out how to create other services within the same? And then you've seen how the founders of Google, like Larry Page, and I think someone forgetting the name, whatever, how they let go, they resigned as CEOs of Google, just be allow restructuring and even the leadership adapting in terms of having the ability to evolve an ecosystem kind of thinking and delivery. So all these things you realize how they come in. So Apple, I mean, it's also one of them. And if you look at your phone, it's also an ecosystem and how it brings in all these other components and all that. So an example of also ecosystems you find a lot is in banking. And I know it's a bit of a big controversial topic. I was in a bank before I joined Safaricom. And one of the things that is very crazy in banking today, especially even in the African markets, is the siloed model. So every bank has this whole thing of like, oh, our KYC protecting our customer data, and I don't know what, which I think it's a bit backwards because you're stuck on protecting customer data of say 5 million customers, 7 million, maybe 15 million for the big banks, tier one and all that. But then the problem is if you have to move from one bank to another, I don't know if it's changing, but for a long time, you wanted a loan from KCB and you're banking with Stanchart. Then they'll tell you, oh, go print your account statement. I don't know if you went through that. If you haven't, probably you're Gen Z, you're very young. It's okay. Take time. Life will catch up. I'm not threatening you, but yeah. The point is, we've been around to see some of those changes in the market. So you'll come print your statement, they have to stamp it, and then you carry it, take physically to another bank. Why? Because KCB cannot access Stanchart accounts and vice versa. So you find customer KYC and all that. It's just like this very secretly guarded, kind of a thing. But then you think of ecosystem, and that's where you want to have product managers who can move and push this kind of conversations. People who are at CBK, for instance, can we have guys who are forward thinking to say, you know what, it's not been happening, but then why can't we, for instance, say that KYC will not be such a cutting, it will stop being such a unique value proposition for banks, such that can we have a centralized KYC, for instance, whereby KYC is probably open and is managed by, say, a regulator like CBK. I don't know, controversial, like I said. But then from a point of, we got multiple banks can access this centralized KYC from a sort of like a global KYC kind of a thing that anyone can access and know who I am, my age, my income, my loans, whatever it is, and all those kind of things. But you see, as long as we're still stuck and banks are thinking of overprotecting what they have and all their KYC and everything, it remains to be a dream, I think, at the moment. Maybe some effort that have been put in, but having worked in a bank, I think I was so stressed for a long time. It was just about 3 years, but the point is a lot of push of this kind of solutions. We were getting a lot of pushback from CBK. And I always joke that the initial answer is to say no. And then they ask you, so what is it you want to present to us? And yeah, it can be frustrating. If you're in banking, I think you can relate in terms of regulation and how they can be a challenge. Amazon still remains one of the biggest ecosystems. And if you think about it, all the way from shopping, they bring in other service providers of different categories. And if you think of shipping all the way to the last mile delivery to your house, the likes of, whoever is doing the last mile, like deliver it all the way to your door, bringing payments, working with the Visas, MasterCards, and all that. You realize Amazon initially, when they started, they didn't have all this expertise, but then you map out the experience of the customer that you want, and then you ask yourself, at what point do they need what? That kind of experience. And that's what I'm saying for ecosystems. You can't build ecosystems based on your partnerships with other organizations. It has to be centered a lot around what the customer wants. Who are the customer? Who are the personas you're serving? And if you're clear on that, then map out the experience. An example I always give is think of when you go to a supermarket. Again, I've always been crazy with this thing because I think when you become a product manager and you've suffered a lot in the industry, with time you just see everything in terms of products and services. And you imagine if I was one, Yeah, what will I do here differently? So you drive in a mall, whether you're driving in or walking in, they have figured out, the experience you want to have all the way. How do I come in? How do you ensure that my car is checked, or maybe I'm, security scanned and all that? What is the parking payment, parking services? They're not offered by, say, Junction as I don't know if it's an organization or what, but then there's cabs, for instance, who come in and say, hey, we are good in parking. This is what is going to be in our space. And in your customer journey, you're very clear that parking is one of the things that you need to care of, whether there are slots, whether the machines, for the meters to charge, whether it's the card or the coins or whatever it is that you use and all that. You come in, you walk in. As you walk in, then probably you want to get a trolley, you want to walk around. And I think for a long time, I actually never knew that actually not everything in the supermarkets that you see is actually owned by the supermarkets. So you find like, if we have Carrefour, for instance, then we have the suppliers. There's a whole funny ecosystem, that a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to, but actually it does exist. So you find we have, whether it's Nivea, for instance, they buy a shelf, which is a space apparently, and then they come and they have their stuff there. And that's what you find sometimes in some shelves or areas. You have some ladies who are branded, and they're telling you, hey, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy that? And not that, whatever. And I know sometimes you're like, especially people like me who are very routine and we stick to routine. I now always get a certain kind of product, whichever row or whichever shelf I go to. So every time you try to tell me to try something new, I'm like, I'm not exactly into that because, yeah, I want to stick with something that I'm very familiar with. But that's part of the ecosystem, how you finish, how you come in. I always observe how, even when you go to stores like Woolworths, for instance, they'll see Waikiki, they are playing music. That music is not by default. It's music that apparently psychologically helps you to calm. And before you know it, you're swiping your card with money you didn't have and you didn't plan, and you're just buying stuff and all that. It's all connected. And that's what you talk about an ecosystem of, you talk of now, like, the whole shopping experience, how you walk in, how do you pay? Are you paying with M-Pesa, cash? All these providers are different, but they're all integrated because when I come to the counter, I honestly don't want to care if you are fighting with Safaricom for M-Pesa payment, so you're fighting with Visa for, or the Stanchart or Stanbic or whoever it is. It's not my problem as a user. All I want to do is make a payment, and whichever option I come with, can that be facilitated? And that's kind of experience you map out all the way to when I leave the mall, when I pay for my parking. Probably I want to eat. There's someone there, Java or whoever it is, who have also provided, like, a food store and etc and everything. So when you're thinking of ecosystems, then you want to look at it from that whole kind of experience. The user experience, the experience you want to offer has to guide what kind of services you bring in, what kind of mapping you're talking about. If I had to bring it closer home so that someone doesn't say, oh, you just worry about Amazon, Apple, whatever. When you think about M-Pesa is one of the examples of an ecosystem, or sometimes people call it a platform, but it's definitely not a product. So one of the things a lot of people don't know is that internally we have about 30 M-Pesa product managers, who are working on different components of M-Pesa. So it's so big to a point of, you can't just have, one person working on it holistically. So there are people who are focusing on consumer payments. There are people who are just focusing on Fuliza, for instance, as a product on its own. There's someone who's just focusing with their squad on, say, Mshwari, someone focusing on something like M-Pesa Go. So there are quite a number of different products within the M-Pesa ecosystem. And when you look at them, initially it kicks off with the cash in, cash out. These are now the deposits, withdrawals with the M-Pesa agents and all that. Things like P2P transfers, how do you send money, how do you buy airtime? These are very initial stage. But then as this is happening, there's a lot of data being generated, which starts to inform you on other use cases that could come in. An example of Fuliza, for instance, a lot of data would show that, when people are making payments, the payments would fail, and they're failing because it's a efficient balance. Then it's just a whole thing of like, why don't you allow these transactions to go through? Because within a second, within a minute, that same transaction is attempted again, and then it goes through. Why? Because someone has drawn money or basically loaded the account, and they can be able to finish the transaction. So it's not failing because they don't have money. It's failing because I didn't check enough to see how much I had on my account. So then you come in and then you're able to complete the transaction. And that's how you have some of these use cases. They're very highly driven by data and the mapping of that. So it gives you a story which now connects to an experience. And for you as a product manager, then you're thinking of, okay, fine, then what can I do to sort it out? Now that's how you find the likes of Fuliza allow the transaction to go through. And then, of course, with a whole overdraft facility, if you have a credit limit and everything based on your history and all that, you're able to tell and see that, probably your Fuliza limit is at 5. And let's not get into discussions of how to increase your limit. I've seen people say, I can tell you a Fuliza limit, increase it. I don't know what, all those things. I'm not an expert. I won't go into that. It's not my space today. We always being short whenever you talk about these topics on M-Pesa. But then you see again the whole evolution when you talk about an interesting concept. We're working with banks, for instance, NCBA, KCB, and all that. People always assume that we have money in Safaricom. A lot of people actually assume that Safaricom has money. Then you forget to realize that you're working with actually partners like banks because they're licensed. They have the licenses to hold money. And because of that, then you find it's what creates now an ecosystem that you're talking about. And without them, then you realize you're limited. You're great in technology, great in data, GSM data, you know who is who, you know where they are, you know where they're working, you know where they whatever, it is who they call, all those kind of things. But then if you don't connect that with the financial side of it, then you fail to be a fintech at the end of the day. And that's how it sort of comes to play. When you talk about things like Mali, there's a Mali, you're working with insurance, not insurance, like wealth, um, investment and wealth providers in the market because they are experts in that space. And you see there's a lot of integrations, there's a lot of working with third parties based on the expertise. There's a lot of just thinking, how do we keep opening up the platform and making it, more robust and accommodate as many as possible. The biggest headache for you as a product manager is how can you think not just as a product? My boss likes to say platforms thinking and ecosystems thinking. You're not just thinking of products. Product is like that's where you start, but then as you advance, you've been there 3, 4, 7 years. You can't be thinking of products. As a manager, you need to think of platforms. You need to have ecosystems thinking. How do you think? How do you figure out if I were to have something called now an ecosystem mapping? How do you map an ecosystem or a platform? How do you map it out and know that these are the needs, these are the target personas that you want to work with for the users, these are the experiences you want to bring in, this is our strength and this is our weakness. So we do not have this capacity. So who in the industry can we come in and work together with? And that's how it comes to play. And so again, very close at home. I'll just say that it's one of the most relatable kind of an ecosystem that you can work with. So I think I've already pretty much covered this. Why is ecosystems very valuable? Because of a holistic aspect of it, which we've talked about. Then also, of course, it boosts revenue because that's also what has helped some of these organizations to sustain themselves into the next decade of evolution and just not go down, because when you're about to start shrinking revenue and all that, then you evolve yourself by partnering with others. An example in the music industry, and I mean, I'm not very big on music and all that, but Sean Paul is an example, actually. I don't know if you've ever observed, this guy has remained relevant from as long as I think I was in class 2. And I'm not young. Okay, I am still young, but not that young. I was called a vintage Gen Z recently. It still hurts, which is true, but it hurts anyway. So Sean Paul has somehow survived all this time. Have you ever wondered why? And one of the things is I've observed is this guy is really good at partnering with young musicians. You just go observe, like he does a lot of collaborations, and in the process, he just tends to renew their energy. He brings the experience, they bring the vibe, they whatever new whatever it is. I don't even know, I'm not a musician and stuff, but what I've observed is some of the organizations that have survived for long is because of their ability to evolve and partner and collaborate and have an open kind of approach as opposed to a closed in. And you find that product managers are at the epicenter of all this kind of evolution. So how do you prepare yourself to be able to drive those kind of conversations? Things like customer experiences, they're be simplified. You don't want to, how we've had a lot of apps, you have different credit or lending apps in the market. So you're always registering KYC on each. But interestingly, is you will never change. You are there. You are who you are. If you are Dennis, for instance, you are the same Dennis. If you go to one app, you'll be first name, last name, date of birth, blah blah blah. You go to another, the same. You go to another, the same kind of thing. You do realize that if there's a provider to consolidate that kind of experience for you, it is much easier. Then can I have a centralized KYC, for instance, open KYC, where it's guarded and regulated by Data Protection Act, all those kind of stuff in the market. But then that talk of anyone who wants to consume, who if I want to consume services of any provider in the market, then can they have a way in which they integrate and they can call and request me to authenticate that I'm actually validating and accepting that I want to consume their service. And therefore, I have a single sign-on kind of an experience, authenticate, and then based on that, I'm able to confirm that, yes, I'm actually allowing you to query my KYC as part of, onboarding to your service. But then you realize the industry is very not yet there because people are overprotective, man. They're overprotecting what they have. You think it's such a secret, like, hey, you can't see this. I don't know if these are traumas from primary and high school. Guys would like write exam and they're just hiding, like, you can't copy my work. I'm like, you're still failing. Why are you hiding your work? I don't know if those are now the people who've grown up and this is now the people who are grown ups today. I always want to wonder the behaviors you saw, like the thieves in high school. Those thieves didn't die or whatever. Like these guys are still in society today. I mean, maybe people died, I don't know. But it's the same kind of characters that are coming into the ecosystem, they're in the industry today and all that. I always just sit sometimes and want to think through and observe, like, the guys used to steal my shirts, who used to steal my shirts in high school, where are they today? There must be, maybe he's a banker somewhere, maybe he works in, I don't know where. Then maybe that character is still there. Yeah, anyway, irrelevant example. Yeah, so how do you drive those kind of conversations? Insights is one of the biggest thing and how you bring it up and about, and also just increasing the range of products that you offer at the end of the day. Yeah, and then when you just look at it in terms of how you're able to build and sustain this kind of ecosystems, and that's where it comes in the whole thing of what is the role of orchestrators. So orchestrators play a critical role because you are the builder, you're the foundation. I think in the Bible, is it the Bible where they talk of God as an orchestrator? I don't know, the world, the universe, whatever. The point is, an orchestrator is how can you become a product manager who can orchestrate an ecosystem? I think that's what I want to also keep driving and growing towards. That can you orchestrate it? Come, sit down, think of what is the entry point? What are the access channels? What are the services you're offering? What is the service roadmap that you're looking at, or the different features? What are the partners that you're working with? What are the integrations? What kind of system architecture we're looking at? Is it sustainable? Is it open? Does it allow us to evolve? All those kind of things, they have to be considered. So yeah, it has to come in the ease of connection with your product ecosystem, the ability for you to consistently evolve based on the different changes. You don't want partners who plug in, I don't know, you think of changing a feature, they take you to court. I'm like, man, you can't even have a meeting to discuss change of terms because probably you're increasing more value for the customers in the ecosystem. And as such, then we're able to think of, what else can we change? Revenue models, how we are charging, the pricing and everything. So you need to also think of, are we having that kind of an easy connection with these partners, and how easy is it for your customers to join? You don't want to make, I worked in a bank and I remember joining, before you join, like there used to be this joke, like the systems are over secured that you can't even access as a customer. They are very secure that you cannot even access. When you log in, it's like a celebration, like, whoo, I have access to my money. You want to make sure you do everything because the next time, and before an OTP comes, I don't know what, it's a headache. So you want to make sure you can do everything at a go. So you don't want to strain how your users access the services and ease of entry and all that. Having tangible goals is also very key metrics to track performance of the different partners that you work with. One of the biggest challenges is sometimes you just have unrealistic goals or even no goals at all. So that again becomes another challenge. Co-creation of innovative solutions. I think I've talked about it, and also something to do with now. How do you collaborate on data? Data is very key, and also with the rise of the whole Data Protection Act, GDPR, and all those kind of stuff, it just makes it harder for you to make sure that you accommodating all the interests of the partners you work with. And then, interestingly, according to BCG, they're talking about, I think that should be Boston Consulting Group, that they found out that fewer than 15% of the ecosystems were sustainable in the long run. So that simply points to what? About 85% that are not sustainable in the long run, which is very disturbing because you see the value that comes with it, but then why is it such a small number of those that survive? And a lot of them are actually failing along the way. So they talk about not addressing a key problem, lack of alignment. And this number two is one of the biggest. I'll give the next slide. I'll just talk about an experience I've had also building ecosystems. And you'll see how if you're misaligned with partners, no matter how much you know the problem, the right users and all that, it takes one partner to bring everything down, the whole house, because you are relying on each other. There has to be trust. There has to be good intentions. I saw another tweet. I don't know if it was a tweet. I don't know if it was Elon Musk or who said that it's actually important to work with people who have good hearts. Go check it out. That actually it's important that you have work with people who have good hearts and good intentions, because sometimes some people just don't, and because of that, then is it a deal breaker? No, but it's actually better if you work with people who have good hearts and good intentions, because they also get to see the bigger picture, and then it's always about progress, not just arguing for the sake of it. Wrong governance is also one of the reasons why ecosystems fail a lot, because then what is the governance structure? The contracts that you have in place, who is responsible for what? Blame game come in when things go south. When it's winning, everyone wants credit, but when it goes south, like, it's you guys, oh, it's you guys, what's your API? Oh, we are calling, there's nothing, the response is empty, all those things. That how it gets. So what kind of a governance structure do we have? And we'll talk about also some of the things I think are critical to the failures. When you talk about APIs, when you talk about contracts, when you talk about customer support, who is doing the first line support, who is doing second line support, etc. Inadequate monetization, I see that's also one of the big budget limitations or runways that can sustain before an ecosystem picks up. So do you have one of the partners or even an ecostrator who is more who has better budget that can be able to sustain, as the other partners probably bring in other areas of strength. And then things just like weak launch strategy, and then basically bad execution. So you are a very agile startup or corporate, but then you're working with a partner who has no idea and does not care about agile ways of delivery. Those can be areas of conflict, because then you're always clashing. You want to be having like a daily stand-up. They're telling you, what are we discussing today? We met yesterday. Why are we here? Those kind of things. And it creates those kind of it's just the conflict that comes with it, because someone does not understand how you do your stuff and all that. Yeah, so this is just an example of a user persona of something I worked in. I think it's 2 years ago. We're trying to consolidate. It's just based again from a market research that we did, and then came up with it's like merchant persona. Merchant here in Safaricom, merchants are people with businesses, just for clarity. So when you can have a user persona, here you have a merchant persona. So from a persona perspective, then you're trying to see what can we do to improve the experience of merchants, anyone who has a business, small, medium, all those SMEs, etc. One of the crazy feedback we got is someone telling us that you guys just think everyone thinks of Safaricom and the best. Then I think it was actually, was it Bamburi Cement or Mombasa Cement? It must be somewhere in Coast. And he said that I received some payments on M-Pesa. Then people who pay me in bank, they actually do like bank transfers. The guys who actually, do cash. So the problem was, he was saying that we've not thought of how do we consolidate and allow them to have a single point of entry for all kinds of payments that are coming in. We only think of ourselves. And the assumption from our side, they were saying, is that we only assume that they get to deal with M-Pesa only. And I felt bad. I felt, a bit of we're not doing a good job, because according to them, they're thinking, or when you think of M-Pesa for business, for instance, can you think holistically? Which tied to a whole conversation about how might we give you, if you want to start a business, how it can get. I don't know if you've tried, you want to deal with KRA, figure out all things to do with KRA, taxation, your documents that you need for the PIN and all that. Then you have to go talk to another guy for a website who will always play you, whatever, how it goes. I was a dev, I know all those stories. Then you have to go to another guy who will tell you like, by the way, you're going to have employees. Yeah, I can give you a payroll solution. Then there's a guy who's telling you like, by the way, we have an accounting, or whether it's QuickBooks or whatever it is, you can set up for you, etc. There's someone who's always going to offer you internet. You've heard of places whereby there's internet that is offered and you don't know the name. He's just some guy, in the caretaker tells you, me, I know a guy who offers internet here. You have no idea where it comes from, where they're connected, how it works, but somehow it works. How do you consolidate all that kind of experience from an ecosystem and give you one such that when I come to you as a product manager, and this is the kind of solution you're offering, can I have one entry point? And that's why I think when you look at the next slide, he's just looking at it from a point of on the far right, that this guy who comes in and says, I want a one-stop experience for myself as a merchant. When I come into M-Pesa for business, for instance, I want to log in. And then when I log in, can I have the ability to get all these kind of experiences? I want to do payments, because I'm receiving payments. Can you open it up to like an open, payment gateway? Let me receive payments from banks, Visa, MasterCard, etc. Airtel Money, not just Safaricom and M-Pesa, all those kind of stuff. Invoicing, how do I handle my invoices? Billing, receipting, payroll and HR. How do you do branding? I don't want to just guess a logo or generate a random ugly logo. Then I'm working with it. Can I have partner? That's when you go to the far left of the screen is now the partners we considered working with, in terms of the services they provide, whether directly or through their own partners. Likes of Microsoft, they have Microsoft partners, etc., and all that, and they are sort of pre-whitelisted, and they provide different services. Whether it's brand quantum or box commerce, and yeah, all those kind of stuff. I think even Oracle NetSuite, I think there's some services they offer around it. Sandbox was also one of them because I think they work with SMEs and training, just building them capacity, and all those kind of stuff. And that's how you start to think of an ecosystem. And this was my first attempt to think around it. It may not look so fancy and everything, but I was just pushing the limits in terms of, yes, I came, all we do is, M-Pesa for business, like you offer M-Pesa payments and all that. But then what more? When you talk to customers, then you realize you're only offering one aspect of their life, but you're not giving them the experience they want. So you want to be a product manager who thinks of the experience, not features, not just product. What is experience, holistic, and if you can connect that, then you make a good sense. Another whole good example is, you see, back when I was working in the bank, we had an attempt to look at when you come to a bank and you ask for a car loan, then they just give you, say, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. They just give you money, in terms of loan. But have you ever paused and wondered, like, why don't banks think of what is the end to end? What exactly are you trying to achieve? You're not just coming here for money. You're trying to buy a car. So where are you buying the car? Can we connect to the agents or the dealers, wherever they are from? Can we connect if it's overseas? Can you connect with insurance, for instance? You want to buy, how that whole experience of you buy a car and then you have to pay insurance for a month because you don't even know who is paying, because you just want the car to get to Nairobi fast, Then when it gets in and there's a whole risk, that party, there's a driver. Can you offer an end-to-end experience? Can banks open up and partner with all these providers? Say like, hey, you are an agency, you do imports and everything, clearing of, or paying for the duties and all that, all the way to when the car lands in Nairobi, in your doorstep, and then offering you even like service. Can you partner with the likes of Auto Express, for instance, for the initial service of the car, and all those kind of stuff. How can we think of those kind of experiences? Again, when you think about it, that's why you find like some of the most evolving organizations, you find it's a bank, but then they're offering you some services in coffee. I don't know. I don't know if you've read about such kind of stuff, because they're thinking of an end-to-end experience. It's not just because we are a bank, we give you loans, that's it. No, there has to be more that actually can bring value to you. As I finish, another example of this, this is even much closer home because it's pretty much what I worked on the whole of last year and all that. So this is an example of an ecosystem we built, and you can check out the app. It's on store. It's called My County. So it was purely just to offer county services in terms of an all-in-one app experience for county governments. When you want to pay for parking, when you want to pay for land rates, etc., and all that. And then on the far left, it was just from a point of thinking was, how can we have options, in terms of experiences? Because you're serving a market. Some people don't have smartphones. Some don't have an iPhone or an Android. All these options have to be available and all that. And then when you talk about DXL, just a digital experience layer, I think this was one of the most innovative part of the whole architecture that we came up with, because it looked at it from a point of when you come into the app, for instance, and then you select, I want to pay parking from Makueni County. At that point, the DXL, which is the digital experience layer, should be able to, it's smart enough to know that who are you, number one, as a user, and then which county do you want to pay to, and then what service. Now, remember, when you come now to the middle, that revenue management systems, that box there, we are not even the providers of that. We're working with the different revenue management system providers of the different counties. So interestingly is these APIs have to connect in such a way that when I select Makueni, the DXL is smart enough to know and route my request to that particular county. When you're talking of the county ID, by the time of the request that I'm putting in. If I was to select Kitui County, for instance, or even like Nakuru County, or whatever it is, then you should be able to be smart enough to know, who am I as a user? What service do I want to consume, and from what county? And then that knows which RMS I need to consume and back. And the whole thinking was a bit of crazy, but I mean, it had its wins and of course some of the challenges that we experienced and all that, and then just the ability to grow and more countries and all that. And I can talk a bit more of how the challenges of this came around, but I mean it's one of the lessons, things that you push boundaries and you learn the hard way, you know. So I think that will actually bring me to the last slide, because this is now I just came up with this. I copied Apple and how they, you know, how they do their launches, you know. They'll come and then there's always finished sorry, they finish their launch with like one slide that has everything, you know. We just call it my county ecosystem, and then what are the differences? So on the far, you have the seamless payments as one of the value proposition. It's one app, you can be able to have different themes and experiences for the different counties, you know. Selecting ability to chat and converse with the governors, you know, some of the quick actions, the admin dashboard, which is now for the staff to be able to log in and see things to do with the different channels of access, the different partners, the likes of Riverbank, Jambo Pay, Nairobi Pay, and all that, and it kept evolving and all that. And then at the bottom is you just talk about the digital experience layer, which is the DXL, you know, in terms of the unified integration experience, you know, the monitoring, reporting, digital ID, and all those kind of stuff. So I'm talking about this because again, I try to have my conversations to be realistic, not very plastic and like from a textbook, uh, because I struggle going to these kind of conversations, and what someone is talking about is very far-fetched. You can't connect with, you know, how do I, if I leave this call, where do I start, or what can I start with, or what can I do different? So from experience, again, we've had wins, you know, but again, uh, it's updating. It's an issue. Sorry, Moraga, you say something. Oh, the slides are not updating. Sorry, I don't know. Are they or not? I don't know. Um, I hope it's not a network issue. Yeah. Yeah, but it's pretty much the actually the second last slide that I'm on. So yeah, I think the point is it allows you to have these kind of lessons and the kind of experiences that it comes with, and just how do you build and adapt. One of the As I finish, one of the interesting things observed when you talk of like building ecosystems is I think I'll just move to the last slide, which is this. What are these killers, or what are these items that you need to just watch out? What I'll call ecosystem killers for product managers. This is what has been my headache for the last 1.5 years. And if I've lost weight, it's because of these items on this screen. My mother thinks I'm not serious with life in some other areas because of these things that you see here. Yes, very frustrating. Talk of APIs. I don't know how much of drama you've experienced with APIs when you're working with different partners. Yes, security standards, you know, what are the formats, what are the endpoints, given endpoints that are actually not working, you know. Interestingly, we have partners in Kenya who actually work on prod. It's always a joke until you realize actually there are people who fix stuff on prod. They don't do UAT. So you're there sharing UAT endpoints. Then they're telling you like, we've not set up any data and endpoints for UAT. We'll meet in prod. I'm like, we can't do that. For our case, maybe things are very tight and there are policies before you go to prod. You must have UAT reports, security reports. You have enterprise risk guys to have confirmed that everything is accurate and working. You know, there are a lot of checks in place before you actually get approval to take things to production. But then someone is telling you like, we don't have UAT. So you spend time as an orchestrator building data and endpoints and I don't know what for the partner on UAT for you to comply before you actually come to prod. It's messed up. It's not the right thing you want to be doing because it's waste time. But then sometimes you're caught in between, do I do it or do I wait, kind of a thing. Talking of KYC, that's another big one. One of the things I advocate for mostly and a lot is push for a global KYC. Global KYC simply means own the KYC of the ecosystem, you know, as orchestrator, be in charge of it. You've observed how Apple does it, for instance, your Apple ID. That's an example of a global KYC. It does not matter whether you come and you want to consume Apple Pay, you want to consume, I don't know, messages or WhatsApp within your iPhone, you want to consume Outlook within your iPhone, or whatever it is, there's that one Apple ID. And every time you even buy a new phone, it does not matter. It's very seamless in terms of how you get transitioned into the new device and all that. When you want to make payments, the same ID is being used, you know. Why have you ever thought about why Apple and some of these big tech have emphasized on that? Is because it's one of the most critical areas of an ecosystem. If you mess up the KYC part of it and the data of these customers, then it is likely going to be a problem because you don't want to leave customer data and who they are to partners who may or may not stick with you for the long run. So can you own it and project it? And all you want to do is like a centralized kind of experience where you offer something like KYC as a service. All you need is to come in, tap in, access. If I authenticate as a user, then I'm allowed to access the different services you offer as a partner and back vice versa. So avoid local KYC because local KYC simply means everyone is coming and saying, oh, we are WhatsApp. You have to register afresh, those kind of things. And sometimes you have to some extent it happens. But then as long as you've already been authenticated at the global level, then there's some bit of assurance, even for the partners and the services they provide, that we do not again need to take you through some level of KYC and authentication and login and I don't know what. So things like login, you want to have a centralized login, single sign-on kind of experience. That once I'm in, then I want to assure the partners that we've done our due diligence to make sure that is taken care of. Compliance with data protection is also one of the biggest, I think, the biggest headache I also experienced because they're asking you who owns the customer. And I'm like, this is too stressful because sometimes you're like, who actually owns the customer in the ecosystem? If you are on WhatsApp, are you a WhatsApp customer or you're an iPhone customer or an Apple customer? I don't know. Go figure it out. And those kind of things. So if you're working with someone like whoever it is you're partnering with, who actually is in charge of the KYC, who owns the data of this customer, who is responsible, who is the process of the data, who is the, those things, the DPA Act and all that comes in. I don't know. Again, you want to watch out for this because it's one of the big potential risk areas if you're building ecosystems. Regulation still tied to DPA is also one of the biggest problems because who are you regulating? Are you regulating the orchestrator? You have a partner who does not comply to regulation, then what do you do? Or they block you from getting an overall kind of approval, whether it's CBK, CA, depending on the industry that you operate in. So again, that becomes another one of the problems to watch out for. Branding and GTM, this is a crazy one. So everyone wants to be the face of the ecosystem. But then I'm like, what do you bring on the table? So again, it's another whole fight. I mean, it depends on who is doing what and what is your value. So orchestrators, you see how Apple, again, sorry if I'm biased with Apple. I think I am biased with Apple. But again, see how they brand themselves, Then you have now other partners who come in. So they tend to swallow you as the overall big brand, but then they allow you to maybe adapt later on, kind of a thing. So again, branding and how you show up in the market to the users remains one of the critical items. The service level agreement. So this is a critical one. So I want to ask you, I don't know if you ever called Apple, for instance, or Google, if you're stuck with your Android phone or something. Have you ever called and they're like, yeah, the people call Safaricom? I don't know if you have. If you have, I want to reach out. I want to know how to call them. I have never, for all the years I've used an iPhone. So interestingly, how do you manage that? First line support. You don't want, again, all the issues of support coming to you because then you want to look at it from a point of view. If a partner is offering a certain service, then let them be the face of the first line support. Because if you are the first line, then it means you're taking a lot of in Safaricom, we call it demand. So that is negative demand. Demand simply means you've launched a product, but then you have a lot of calls coming to call center asking about, oh, I'm stuck here, this is not working. In Safaricom, for instance, the average cost of a call from a user whenever you call Safaricom call center is about 150 bob, I think, or 200, somewhere there. So you can imagine, do that, how many calls you receive every hour, every day, how many people are receiving those calls. Do all that cost. Call center is such a cost, for a lot of big tech and big organizations. So you want to make sure that you reduce demand. That's why, even for us, one of the metrics we are tracked against is demand. How much, when you launch a product, how much demand are you generating to the call centers? You don't want to launch a product and then the cost of sustaining the calls coming because of your product are way higher than actually the revenue you bring in for your product. You see how that kind of mismatch happens. So you don't want to be their cost to the organization. When you do the net effect, then it means your reliability in terms of your new product. These things happen. Again, check them out. Then lastly, in terms of partnerships, again, this is a big one. Figure out, sometimes I've seen also another challenge in the industry is a partner being pushed down your throat because of, I don't know who from the top has said, oh, this is my person, oh, I know this guy, oh, they're doing amazing stuff. I was constantly in meetings whereby my time was being wasted. And that time is wasted. And then you have to promise someone like, hey, after this, what we'll integrate with you, or share APIs. And I'm just like, man, I do not know what value you bring to the customer. But then you're being forced to figure out how to accommodate them. So again, you want to be able to have the muscle as a product manager to constantly ask, why do we need you in the ecosystem? Why do you need you to integrate platform? What is the value that you bring that someone else is not bringing? If you can't have those kind of pushback and conversations, then again, it's a problem, because then you end up being so busy, integrations, APIs, and everything. But then at the end of the day, there is no value to the end. So again, those are some of the challenges that you want to make sure you. Yep. I think that's pretty much it. I don't know if Caroline is saying something. Muted. Okay, sure. I think it's an audio issue. Yeah, so I want to stop that respect time. I don't know if you have any reactions, whatever, but all in all, ecosystems are here to stay. So if you are playing in the space of a product manager for products, you want to think of what is next for you. You're thinking of platforms, and ecosystems. How can you be a product manager who builds platforms and who builds ecosystems? And I can tell you for a fact from experience, it's not easy. That's a fact. It's not easy, because there are a lot of very few reference points of successful ecosystems, especially in Africa. We don't have a lot of reference areas and points on how to build ecosystems for the African market. Yeah, a lot of factors are in consideration that you have to bring in and all that. A lot of partners or even startups or organizations, they still don't appreciate the whole concept of, how do we partner to bring shared value. People still want to hoard things and say, as you only do this, this is ours, this is our customer, these are the products or services you are delivering. But then at the end of the day, you find, like, how many, say, credit products do you have, credit lending apps do you have in the market, for instance? That's an example. How many, you can think of anytime you have a certain service or product which has multiple offerings in the market, and then you find there's somewhat related, but then they're offered by like totally different people. There's always opportunities to partner and say, we are pretty much in the same space. What can we come together and offer as a unified experience for our users? I hope we can push for these conversations, because they do make a difference. But if not, we spend a lot of money, budget, costs, running our platforms, developing them. Yet we are doing something and developing something that someone already has off the shelf. At the end of the day, you see, it doesn't make sense. So maybe a bit of swallowing our pride and saying, hey, I don't have this, you have it. I have this, you don't have that. Can we come together and figure out how it connects? Yeah, maybe that would make our country even better in terms of the kind of experiences we push for our fellow Kenyans on all matters products. Yeah, so I will stop there unless you have any comments from the team. I'll give back to you. I don't know if Thaya is there. Or you have any reactions from anyone? If not, we'll just thank you guys for joining.
I have a reaction. Great presentation. It's really great to understand how different ecosystems play. Great to see actually the Safaricom ecosystem. Well, I am shocked that you guys don't have money in M-Pesa, but that's a story for another day. But one of the key takeaways for me is, how do I help build ecosystems in whatever it is I am doing as a product manager? I definitely understand the need for us to have ecosystems. So for me, the question is, how do I play my part?
Thank you, Sarah, for that. Much appreciated. Yes, we're always learning every day. I think that conversations just provoke us to think of, what's next, in our space. It's interesting. 10 years ago, product management was not actually defined, as a craft. I don't know if some of you might have observed, been working for more than 10 years or so. It wasn't really a thing. When I was in school, there was nothing like a product manager. I don't know. I don't remember anything about it. It was mostly project managers, those kind of things. So I feel like we're in the space where we are redefining what we are doing ourselves and trying to push the boundaries and deciding what is this thing we're doing as product managers. And does it make sense to users, to our leadership in different organizations and all that? So yeah, but I think through these kind of discussions, we get to share experiences. Yeah.
Yes, hi, Iman. This is Dennis. Thanks so much for the presentation. It's I guess, illuminating is a word to use here. Just trying to think a lot about, how to actually grow a platform. Interesting thing you've mentioned about how a lot of platforms / ecosystems sort of die. I think I would sort of like be in that space, having come up or tried to come up with one and then it flopped. So it's very interesting to just see some of the things that just make this not look like a happy coincidence. So I would like to probably engage more on this. I hope you'll be available for maybe further conversations.
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
really love to know more.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm happy to engage further. And yes, I think the vulnerability is that sometimes they do fail, and sometimes they fail within our own space. There's no shame in it. There's nothing wrong with it. We learn, we try. But if everyone wants to project a picture of, yeah, we are doing it, we know what we are doing, I think that's what creates the whole fear of like, am I the only one struggling with something, And then you don't want to push and try. At the end of the day, then you're just losing it. But yeah, I think it's just the vulnerability that comes and sharing that, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. This is why it didn't work. Someone else learns from it, and yeah, I hope you can find pride also in such. All right.
Hi,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Oh, hi, Aza. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Azza. I'm a product manager at Ban Manufacturing. It's a clean cook stove company, and we mostly develop hardware products. So this was very insightful for me, and I was able to learn a lot, especially like since I don't have much of a background in software. So thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you, Azam. Good, it's good to meet you. I'm happy. I hope we can keep connecting a lot more. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
I'd appreciate that too.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. All right. I think I will give it back to. I don't know if you're there. Should be end of my presentation.
Hello.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo. Okay, I don't know if he's still here, so maybe I can close on our behalf, on his behalf. Yeah, so thank you guys. I'm sure we'll keep conversing, and if you're not in the WhatsApp group, I hope you can join. I think that's where you get to connect with a lot of people and can keep having this conversation. So, yeah, thank you, and wish you a lovely evening. Bye.
Thanks, Iman. Have a good evening. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.